Jonathan Brink, what is happening, my friend?
It's good to see you, Bob. It's
Good
absolutely
seeing
good to see
you.
you.
Man, so good to see you. It's been quite a while since we've hung out. For the
Absolutely.
audience, I've known Jonathan just over 20 years now, getting close to 20
Probably.
years.
Yeah.
And we spent a lot of quality time in the early portion of those years, and then work and separation of states and so forth seemed to get in the way as you move through seasons. But now reunited, back back together here again. And before we would go into kind of our topic at Adventures at Halftime, thank you everybody for joining us. Remember to subscribe down below, and all the links and the things we'll be talking about today will be in the show notes, obviously. So thanks for everybody listening. Jonathan, kudos to you. Because given some background, I had an opportunity to spend some unbelievable life transformation changes and period of time in my life with Jonathan. And depending on the year, would have been 6 to 8 other brothers at a time. And walking through our journeys together as men and what we call the Band of Brothers, and that's been bantered around an awful lot by a lot of groups and so forth. But Jonathan was really at the leading edge, and I want to say bleeding edge of men's ministry, but beyond just really just shattering what one would consider if you're brought up in the church of men's ministry, but really going much more detail into the matrix of our life and understanding how we are good and how we move through things. But I think the biggest takeaway is that we're not alone during that period of time. And that's why I want to have you back on the show, Jonathan, and talk about some of the things that you're doing now with your podcast. I've had several opportunities to listen to your new podcast, Living in the Matrix podcast, and you've got a lot of other things coming up. So, Jonathan, why don't you share with everybody who you are, where you live, what you do, and what your season of life is at halftime.
Hey, Bob, it's so good to hang with you. I mean, honestly, for my listeners, Bob is probably one of the most genuine people you're ever going to meet. And it's always been a pleasure to hang out with him because you've always brought so much wisdom to the table. That's the thing that I always appreciated about you is you really always brought a very sincere heart and an appreciation for wisdom. Like, what's the smart thing to do here? Because you're a very pragmatic guy. So I can't wait to see where this podcast goes. And so I'm a dad of 6 kids. I have a Brady bunch of 3 and 3, a blended family. And I live in just outside of Silicon Valley. I grew up in Silicon Valley, and I work in software development in user experience. So basically my job is to study people's pain and make a more productive way for people to do things. That's essentially what I do. So I've spent my last 25 years studying the idea of pain, and it's been a fascinating journey. I'm an Epicurean. I love sensual experiences like food and wine and flavors, and I love to cook. I love to be out on the water. I live on the water in Discovery Bay, and I'm really exploring a lot of my entrepreneurial moments right now. I'm getting ready to release an app to create a new social network. So I love product development. And I'm also working with a very good friend of mine on a film project. So I have so many. I am discovering a new creative chapter in my life, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I just watch your life continue, move through the seasons and the different iterations, and I would have to classify you as uber creative and exploratory, and it's really, really cool to chat a lot about those items. Why I brought you in, because catching up with you, and we'll catch up later, a little bit later as well, is Adventures at Halftime. We look at men's life expectancy. It's kind of a depressing note, but 81 is the life expectancy. So you start entering this field, midlife, what we call halftime, at like 40, and then you smack dab 50. You're like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And all the different challenges and the things that move through a man's life. And there hasn't been a space to be able to talk about those just, publicly. There are other people attempting to do it. But, the rich, the famous, the celebrities, the big athletes and so forth, but really just unvarnished, authentically talking to people that are moving in lives. And again, to reflect that, you're not alone. And in this world, and people have gone there before you to share their life experience, like some tips. And one of the big mantras here is that, fear is a lie and darkness distorts. And,
Yep.
you brought up the topic of pain, right? Your exploration of pain, which is fascinating. So let me kick this off and just share with you, what do you think of the top two, maybe three, if you got them, things that you've experienced and all the people you've interviewed and the people you've researched in the space of pain? What are the 2 to 3 biggest issues that men are grappling with now here in 2024?
Uh, so I have been studying men because I'm a man. I study myself, and I listen to so many people on human development. And here's what I think what men really ultimately have to come to terms with is, do I like myself? And I think that's the long journey of every human being is, can I learn to like myself? Because I am the only person that I sit with 100% of the time, waking and sleeping, you know?
Right.
And so what I'm realizing is that what we went through, which is, guys in our 30s that were really wrestling of what does it mean to be a guy? That was a weird period. And going through your 30s is where you're like semi-confident. Like you've discovered a few things, and getting over that arc of liking yourself through that whole process, I think, is ultimately what we were all doing, kind of learning to like go, can I sit with myself? And I think once you get over that journey of, like you talk about halftime, what I'm learning is I did all that work. And guess what? I'm now free to do a lot more because I'm not carrying all that baggage. And I think that's been one of the greatest joys of what I've discovered over the last couple of years is I did my work and I let it go. I met with a coach and about 2 years ago who helped me start this process. And we did an inventory of my spinning plates, and I realized I had 8 plates that I had been carrying for a decade that no longer needed to be carried for. And that's all that baggage is just all that crap that we build up in our lives, and we worked on it. And I think the greatest thing I discovered through that entire thing was I needed men to show me how to get over myself, you know? And I think once you do get over yourself and learn to love yourself and learn to really invest in yourself and say, I'm worth creating something much more, you realize, man, there's a lot of life to be lived. And I think I'm in that period right now.
That's beautiful. I love the analogy of the spinning plates because you can, we talk about
Yeah.
categories and, I think men put things in silos. We kind of compartmentalize, try to,
Mm-hmm.
at least I do. I'm like, okay, this has this issues. I'm going to work on
Yeah.
this and move those things. It's plates, what it is, because they're not just, they don't stop. Okay, I wait for me
And they
until I get
require
back.
energy.
And you got to keep on spinning
Right.
them.
Right.
Right? My gosh, that's phenomenal. Yeah, what a great analogy. I think also a key point which you're saying there, which is really fascinating, I'd love to unpack it a little bit, is that there's so much more, right? You know, we have, as men, we go through a lot of challenges, go through divorce, we go through jobs, getting fired through jobs, even at midlife, those things. And yeah, you could put you're so much into building your castles, right? Climbing a ladder. And then you wake up and you go, this ladder was actually on the wrong side of the wall this whole time. And
Yeah.
I think is that you're not done yet at midlife, but you're wiser, right? Smarter, you know. Have you experienced any of that as you clip midlife? Was there any journey points or moments when you're like, fear is not part of what I'm going to live anymore. I'm going to move forward. Creating a movie, doing a movie. You've always been creative, but you're going to do a motion picture. You're going to do a movie. You're
Well,
going to do apps. I mean, it continues on.
so I started my app project 7 years ago, and it's been a product of getting over my own fear.
Oh,
Like just
wow.
getting on the store was about me getting over my fear. The desire behind it, I think, is huge. but it only has to get to there to be successful. And I realized I'm just going to keep pushing it over. I had an epiphany last night for myself, and I actually posted on Instagram about it. Is, you know, the idea of micro habits?
Yeah.
So I only need a little tiny bit of courage. And then from there, the next day, I only need a little tiny bit more. And then all of a sudden I'm here and all I have is courage. And that's where I'm at right now. I'm like, I'm over myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm over that voice in my head that says, you can't. And I want to now, I don't know what I'm capable of, but I want to discover that. And the more that I live into that reality, the more energy I have, because it's meaningful. It's not like, I feel like I spent the first 40 years of my life trying to not kill myself. You know, I was my own worst enemy. I was my own worst enemy. That's what I ultimately discovered is I created all my own BS and I lived and suffered for it. And once I learned to get over myself, because I told, like you said, I just told myself a lot of lies back then. You know, life happened. I couldn't deal with it. So I told myself a good lie. I think that's why we tell ourselves lies, is because we just can't handle them emotionally. And now I'm realizing I can go back and release that child from that suffering, because all I had to do at 10 years old when my parents divorced was survive. Because now I can go back and say, okay, you can let go of that suffering. I can handle it now. And that's been a very meaningful experience for me the last couple of years. Is I've been going back to those moments and just releasing myself to be a human being. And it's been very healing in a really good way.
Well, you mentioned that it took 7 years to get to where you are now on like the app project, and but to take the courage. Was there just a defining moment, like, hot oil over the top of your head, or did you run and smack dab in the wall, going, crap, what the fuck have I been doing my whole life? Or was it just the maturation, those baby steps, the micro habits, like you were saying? But was there one moment when you went, flip the switch, here I go?
Yep, there was.
Can you want to back that a little bit, if you don't mind?
Yeah, because I was at a dinner with one of my best friends, and his name is Kevin Ackroyd, and he's spoken into my life in really weird ways. We have this weird energetic connection where we say something and it lights up the other person. And he kind of said, get over yourself, dude. That's what he said to me. And I was like, you're absolutely right. Get over yourself. You know, I'm not like, it's not that bad. You know, what's the worst that could happen if I actually succeed?
You didn't
That's the
die.
way I'm looking at it.
You didn't die. You're not going to die.
Right. And so I realized the expression of the app is actually my greatest creative outlet, because I work in user experience in software development. So I'm a product designer. And my goal is, can we create a social network that actually solves the fundamental problem of all social networking, which is the troll? Everyone's a troll, because we're all invited to give the social world our worst side at one small moment.
So true.
And so how do you solve that? Well, you begin with an idea of creating an ethic of the platform to become your best self. That's the place to practice it. So that's the idea and I realized I couldn't get there if I couldn't resolve in myself to get over myself. And he called me to task, and I'm like, in those light bulb moments, I had one. We were having the greatest wine I had in a long time. So it was a beautiful moment. And I realized, okay, and every day I'm just taking one step forward. And we're hitting a lot of roadblocks. Like, it's not been easy to fulfill the process, but we're getting there. And we'll probably be there sometime this week. And that's the first milestone. But all I need is one little bit more courage for step 2 and 3 and 4. And all of a sudden, I know it's going to work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting. I went through this exercise over last 12 months, this last year. I reside in Idaho and from California, and there are some great similarities to where I'd lived in California. The mountains and the Sierras, like Tahoe, it was just beautiful, and very similar here, but just a lot more of it. And it was a journey of processing, how am I going to redesign my life? right? And you being a designer, user interface, UX, and designing, if you were going to unpack that, what would you say with the five? Are there some skills that translate that going through this process of designing your life? Everything kind of moves and everything's very somewhat fluid, or in technical terms, agile sometimes in technical spaces. But what would you say to those that are just now stepping in or going down a path, not necessarily with apps, but in life and age and life seasons of life, that how can you start? Where do you start on the project of redesigning your life experience?
Yeah. So it's funny you ask, because I didn't even think about this, but I have a process called the UX mindset. I've been developing it, kind of just putting it down, kind of like I did with Thrive, just putting it down in terms of tangible terms, and then I was going to give it away to people trying to get into UX. But what I realized is was what I was doing to myself, and the idea is actually very simple: is you live on a simple axis of two secting paradigms, internal and external, and positive and negative, okay? Or negative and positive. So you have, and when the internal is positive, you're always good. You're always on a good path. When your internal is negative, I don't like myself, you're always going to be the route of chaos. And what I realized, there's only two paths we can take, because there's only one pivot. There's only one polarity of me. Am I good or am I not? I have to come to terms. It's the only one I have to come to terms with. And that single pivot point allows me the choice between alchemy, which is healing and learning, and chaos, which there's no learning in. You don't learn in chaos. You just experience, because there's no meaning to it. And chaos is only created when I don't like myself. When I've come to a terms that I don't like myself, I'm not a good person, or I've done enough that I'm cynical of myself. I've lost touch with myself. And I think what Jesus was trying to do was that, in essence, it starts there, people. The way is loving yourself the way God would love you. So empathize with that. What would it look like for God to love you? And that is discipleship. That is growth. That is how you grow, because you're only asking one question: how would God love me in this moment? And when I love myself consistently, love, 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 now all I am is love. And that's the way. And that's what Jesus came to teach us. And it all starts with the self. Don't worry about anybody else. Worry about yourself, because once you love yourself, you'll love everybody else.
Yeah.
That's what I'm learning.
Yeah.
And that's the alchemy of it that I'm kind of beginning to put together with UX. Is it begins with you loving yourself.
I think it's great. I think you've nailed so many wonderful points there, in that we have 50 plus years, sometimes 45, 50 plus years of stuff.
Oh yeah.
Bags that just sit on your shoulders. I think there's a great exercise of picking up a ruck bag, 50-pound ruck bag, in preparation for like elk season, winter, and throw on your shoulder, and not just carry it up a hill, but just wear it around all day, and wear it around every day, every week, every month, every year for, let's say, 25 years.
Yeah.
It just gets old. Your shoulders start slouching. Your attitude gets more grumpy, right? Things don't go your way all the time because it's constantly you're carrying that baggage through. And if you don't start thinking about loving yourself, or understanding that you're good and that you can shed that weight, you're just going to carry that baggage into new experiences. So, engaging in other experiences, I think, also carrying that baggage. And sometimes people really don't like people bringing their other baggage with them along the way.
Right.
You got to shed it, drop it at the door.
Oh yeah.
I'm done with this. And if it's truly a new experience, a new adventure, doing something new for yourself, new marriage, right? Or passing of a loved one, and then stepping in to do something new. Learn how to fly fish, go run, do your first 5K, whatever it is. You'll be that much better if you can just drop that bag and drop those bags and get them off your shoulder.
I actually learned a new trick recently that I think you'd appreciate, because you just touched on it. The simplest way to heal yourself is to be creative, because that's how you release the negative energy without realizing it. So fly fishing, I think, is creative. I think it was you who made me realize is you don't go to catch a fish. That happens. You go to learn the art of fishing.
That's true.
And so that's when you get into it. And so creativity, any kind of creativity is the beginning of healing, because you're allowing your body to express itself, and the negative will come out. And then you'll go, okay, now I can deal with it. Because most things that we wrestled with over the last 30 to 40 years happened 30 years ago. We're not 10 anymore. You have enough emotional character to go back and release yourself from. That's all you're doing. You're just releasing yourself from it. And because it's just negative energy stored in your body, but it lives in your nervous system. And if you hold it in your body too long, it gives you disease. And we're now realizing it. And so but here's the problem, and this is the hard part for us men, is men don't like compassion because it feels feminine.
Yeah.
And Jesus began with compassion, but compassion had to lead to responsibility, and that's the masculine energy. And that's what I think men are waking up to, is it begins compassion with myself. And it's hard to do that. It's hard to forgive yourself for when you fail your family. Like, I'm a man, I should be better than that, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I think men are good at crucifying themselves, really.
I think we flay ourselves in front of everybody, and we hope people watch us.
We invented Harry. Yeah.
True. I think just going back to the fly fishing analysis, if any of you are fishermen, that would be fly fishing, but I fly fish, and catch and release has been my dynamic. I haven't kept one yet that was ready to eat. But if you do fly fish and you have like 10, 12 things, just a bunch of bullshit and crap that you've been carrying around in your life, every fish you catch, unhook it, look at it, take a picture of it, and then just release it and call it by name. It is really a fascinating journey, and you don't think about it because you're going to work all day. Maybe you can get skunked and come back the second day and catch one fish being on the water 6-7 hours. You got that one fish, and that is this. And I'm releasing you. Bye-bye. It's kind of funny along the way. There's so many analogies across sports and fitness. And
I think that's a great one, because and what I appreciate about you, because you share on your reels all the time about what you're learning and thinking, and don't wait for the catch of the fish to be the goal, because there's so much to the art of fishing to learn, and it's a beautiful sport. It really is. It requires an immense amount of patience.
I discovered just a couple of years ago elk hunting, and a lot of a new I'm what they call late comer to big game hunting, and it's archery. So you want to talk about patience and the grind, and to come back empty-handed, because they're very, very smart, very agile. But back to the same point, is that it's the experience.
Yeah.
And to be there with friends, and to be able to enjoy the process of that you put your time, talent, treasure into along the way. So it's fascinating, the work that you're doing, and the studying. I've never heard you put it in context of studying pain. Pain is also a great stressor and great motivator to do something about it.
Well, pain is just a resistor. That's all it is. So pain is the point at which you are confronting reality and not liking it. That's all it is. And that resistance to reality puts you in conflict in your nervous system. And that's what people don't realize, is we create our own pain. No one can create your pain but you. You can create physical pain from a cut, things like that. But your emotional pain lives in your nervous system. And that's created by you. And that's what most people suffer from, because your body will heal from a cut, but it has a hard time healing from emotional content. And the more you deal with it, the more you can release it. But it's hard to deal with it. So it's like you said, it's hard to do that alone, because that's part of life. And that's why I think we got lucky. I look at that period, because I only did it for that period. I only did it for about 10 years, but sitting in a group of men for 8 to 10 men once a week for 3 years was a lot, but it was incredibly valuable. And I didn't discover the value for probably 10 years after that.
I constantly refer back to the time of self-examination, and if I'm calling bullshit on myself along the way. And there's a lot of
Yeah.
bullshit I carry around, it's human and I'm working through it.
Bullshit's expensive.
It is.
Like we
It
think it's
really is.
cool. Yeah, it's expensive. That's the thing is back to pain. Life will show you which way not to go because it'll hurt. That's all pain is really there for, is to show you your own resistance so you can let it go. Because life is always trying to engage us in the better, in magnifying. What is life giving?
Yeah.
Okay, but we're trapped in the death spiral of chaos because we're at odds with ourselves. Most people are at odds with themselves. They don't even have a relation. They're disassociated from themselves because they can't deal with what they don't like about themselves. And so they disassociate, they hide it and ignore it. And when you do that, it shuts down your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what most men endure. They live all in their head and they have no emotional content because they can't emotionally handle it. And it's just easier to grind. And I get that because I grinded hard for a long time. But I realized you can't survive and thrive without your heart, because when you have both, then you have coherence and integrity.
Oh, yeah.
And that integrity is what gives you a magnification of power and energy because you have meaning. That's what Viktor Frankl figured out in Auschwitz. Is you need both. I am in command of my emotional response to this situation. And when you learn how to do that, then you have the fruit of the spirit called self-control because you're controlling your nervous system. So I spend a lot of time studying how people relate to pain, and it really is very, very simple. And that's what I'm trying to distill right now.
I might just completely botch the quote and the term, but fear leads to anxiety, or pain leads to fear, and the anxiety is nothing, or fear is nothing except anxiety over things that may never ever come to be.
Yeah, research tells us 88% of what we worry about never comes true, but we live with the fear until it doesn't. Think about how long that can be for some people. Like, oh, this is going to happen. And then they live in that fear. So 7 out of 8 items that you worry about are like that.
Yeah.
Imagine if we as a society, I thought about this the other night. Imagine if we as a society just eliminated the things that we didn't have to worry about. That's how I think AI may be extremely useful, is helping you to stop worrying about the things that won't come true. Because probably that's AI's best element, is giving you the probability of something. It'll say, don't worry about it. Because that's what most people deal with, is the things that are never happening.
I never thought about AI in that context, but very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
I study AI a lot too.
Yeah, I'm like a book nut on it right now as well. I've been using it for about 2 years in marketing context, but everything's just escalated the last 6 months. Every 3 months, it's just something new.
Well, here's the thing. Here's a note about that. Heard this quote and I thought it was super interesting. This is the first generation, so it's generation alpha. So it's, I think, everybody but 7 and below. This is the first generation that nobody knows how to teach them correctly. Okay, because you don't know how AI is going to impact anything, so nobody can see farther than tomorrow. That's the current state the world is in right now. Nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow. And this generation is going to grow up in that world. The value of it is that you can shift the narrative very rapidly and quickly. It's who controls the narrative. And that's why we're in a fight with the media, and people are saying, yeah, it's all BS. And so there's that element that people are really dealing with, is how do we deal with this AI? Because what we experienced the last 40 years with the internet, and with, really the 20 with the explosion of Google and Facebook. What's next when you add AI? And imagine it going 30 times faster. We're not going to know what hit us. And we're trying to learn how to emotionally deal with that, because that happens in our body. And I think a lot of people are freaking out right now. So, not to be a downer. So
no, but it's just reality, confronting it and shedding light on it. Like, as I mentioned, darkness distorts, and trying to put some lights on it, say, no, this is not that bad and scary. There are things you need to be precautionary about, but if we can manage it appropriately, it's very, very, very intriguing conversation. But
and here's the thing. Nefarious actors always have one intention: to divide. So any message that divides you is probably not a good one. That's the simplest way that I've found to really begin to ask, where do we go from here? What's not dividing us? Where can we find common ground to work together? Because I don't care if you're red or blue or purple. I don't care. How do we work together? Because we're both citizens of the world. We're both citizens of this country. How do we do something positive? Because we've kind of figured out how to do the worst case scenario. We're here. How do we solve that?
We've got a lot of adventures going on in your life with,
I do. I have way too many. My brain is great.
Are there any other things? How do you keep yourself mentally balanced and physically strong? You always have.
You know what's funny is I'm asking that question right now because I have never worked out in my life. I used to be an athlete right up until college, and after college, I stopped working out. I've never worked out in a gym other than maybe a total of 3 months over the last 25 years. That's literally how much. But I walk my dog every night with a fairly brisk pace. So I always get at least a little bit of cardio a day, and I eat well. So I don't eat breakfast. I do fasting until noon, and then I have a 12 to 6 schedule. On weekends, I can drink alcohol and dessert if I want to, but I try and keep under 1,500 or 1,800 calories, and I'm totally fine with that. I'm realizing my body doesn't need that many calories unless it's dealing with all the BS. That's the beauty of getting rid of your BS, is you don't have to expend the energy to take care of it. I cannot shout that loud enough.
Right.
So I don't need the calories.
Well, it sounds like you got a good protocol. I mean, that's very much.
It's a start. So that's one of the things we do on our Living in the Matrix.
Traditional Europe and even in some of the Eastern Oriental countries, it's walking after meals, taking time, breaking away, low calorie consumption. The blue state, it was the blue areas. If you haven't seen that movie, it's the Netflix on it. It's very, very unique. Proper diet and nothing strenuous, but walking. I mean, so you're working on those protocols. That's great. So I always have a question towards the end of the podcast is, what kind of advice would you give to your younger self?
I'll share that in a very quick story.
Sure.
I recently went to Hawaii. I felt called to Hawaii. I bought the trip without my wife's permission, which I'll never do. I normally would never do. And I said, I'm going, go with me. She's afraid of flying. So I thought the trip was about her getting over her fear. I get there and discover I am now sitting in the space, the exact space where I dealt with all of my divorce when I was 11 years old. And I had not realized I had carried that for 45 years in my body. And all of a sudden I felt like I had a date with destiny, and being there for 5 days, everything kept coming up going, this is the moment. Just go there and do. And I sat with myself, with my 11-year-old self, and said, you survived. I got this. It was one of the most healing things I've ever done in my life. And I think if I can encourage anybody, do inventory on your life and let go of any negative judgment of yourself, because you can't change the event, but you can change how you perceive yourself in that event. Because all my 11-year-old self was stuck and I suck. Like, I'm lost. And I went back and said, I got it from here. And I could release all those lies because I'm 57. I can do that now. Anybody can do that because you're the one who makes the contract with yourself, how you talk to yourself. So when you say, I suck, which I don't, I have to cancel that in my body. Your body remembers it. And when you're 11, you don't realize that's what it means. You get stuck in it. And it becomes the thing that you ruminate on all your teens like I did. And you get to a point when you're 23 and you realize, I want to kill myself. So go back and do that inventory and just release yourself, because the more you do, and find men who want to do it. And I think that's what's happening. That's the one thing, Bob, that I see is there's an awakening of men who realize they want to do that.
Yeah. That, and I also think just a derivative of that is that I think we're all clamoring for authentic things more than ever. Authenticity has been tossed around for 20 years. Like, I'm not authentic. I want to be my real self. It's like, it's just bantered around, but men are coming together in very unique groups. I think that you're also seeing a revival of spirituality, specifically Christianity. Did you see like in Georgia, Costa Mesa, 100,000 people over the weekend getting baptized? It's a miraculous time, a time I don't think we'll ever see again, but it's powerful. I think there is a yearning as humans, but it's more specific, and even more specifically as men, to be authentic based on how we've been created and what we desire to do, and like shed the
Here's why I think
skin,
that's happening.
and shed the weight.
Yes. Let me share why I think that's happening is because people know we were rooted in Christianity as a nation. So we're never going to shed that label, but we have an entire generation with Gen Z and most millennials that have basically said, yeah, let's find something else. And in that void, we realized, wow, this thing about loving your enemy right now would really be helpful. So maybe Jesus does make sense. And I think that's what people are recognizing is they don't want the religious side. They want the Jesus side that says love. How do I love myself? Because I got to love myself. This social thing is killing me. How do I love myself?
I think there's a lot to that. Maybe we can come back at a later time on another episode and chat about that, because so many things are happening nowadays that all kind of intertwine and intermingle around that.
And I know you have a heart for that, Bob. I hope you continue to look into that in your podcast, because I think, to my credit to you, the thing that I've always appreciated about you is that you do care. And that's the thing. You are a genuine person, and I'm super excited to see where this podcast goes, because when people tap into that, it's going to explode. It's awesome.
Thanks, Jonathan. Everybody, Jonathan Brink, co-host of Living in the Matrix podcast, creative designer, father, grandfather, right?
Yep.
And just remember, everybody, you're not done yet. Fear is a lie and darkness distorts. You're not done yet. Get after it today. Thanks again.